Okay, today I'm going to show how to get a blank like this rotating exactly on center on the lathe so you get a nice evenly balanced turning like this handle. After you laminate the blank to the point where you want it, and here's an example. This one's laminated a little differently from the one I showed in earlier videos, but the concept is going to be the same. You see how the end is all uneven? That is because we don't really care when we're laminating it up, because we know we're going to trim it off. So that's what I'm going to do here. Now before you trim it off, make sure you knock off any glue that might be sticking out, because you want this to rest up against the rip fence evenly, not twisted or on an odd angle, because then that will offset your end and that will rotate out of the center, and all the rest of the work you do won't work because the rest of the thing will be out of center. So we're going to trim this end off, and it's going to make some noise, but let's go. Here's the end we trimmed off, and here's the result. Now we've got a nice flat end, very clean. We're going to trim the other end off so that we can set this on end as we work on the next steps. So let me do that now. Didn't quite get it, I got to trim some more. And good to go. Now to find the center of an assembly like this, it's fairly clear to everyone. You just connect the opposite corners on the geometry. It could be out here, it doesn't matter as long as the corners are equal. And you make an X, which I'm going to do now with a pencil. So let's, now for accuracy, if this core was very small, you'd want to go out to a further point. Here, this is big enough, these points are going to give you enough accuracy. So let's do that. There's one line. And here's another line. Now if you can see that, yeah, I hope you can. Obviously this is the center. If you just put a center punch there now, the chances are it's going to wander a bit. If the grain of the wood is very coarse, in this case it's not particularly, but either way, it'll probably wander. And just finding the center isn't enough. You have to actually locate to it when you put it on the lathe. So even if you just go to put your lathe center on that point, the chances are the wood grain is going to make it wander before it fully engages, and that will offset this whatever way it goes. Now that I've marked both ends, this is where some of the technique comes in. For putting an end cap on here and transferring the center that we find here to the end cap and the waste block, which will carry the geometry of a hole right to your lathe, so that your center is transferred all the way out. So now I'm going to show you the end caps that I prepare. Here are two end cap assemblies, and I call them end cap assemblies because this wood here, it's nice myrtle wood, and I've cut these rounds out using my drill press and hole saw technique, which I show in another video. This end cap of myrtle wood will be a nice decorative cap for the tool handle. This is the waste block, just a piece of red oak, in which I've used a starter drill and drilled a small hole which will engage my live center and dead center on my lathe. So that's where the lathe center is going to end up. What I do is I glue these together first, just eyeballing it, close as fine at this point. You can see that this hole probably isn't exactly on center of this round part. We don't care that much. It's also not going to be centered to the end cap. I make the end cap big enough to accommodate the size I want to end up with, so I know I can turn that round on the lathe. The trick now is to carry this hole through to this side, which is simply a matter of going into the drill press with a small drill, and you can write this down. It's a number 43 drill, and that the reason for that size will be explained very shortly. And I drill through and end up with a hole here, so I know this hole lines up directly with this hole. And let's do that with this piece here. So now that hole is carried through from this side here. Again, you can see it's not perfectly in the center. We don't care, and I'll show you why. Let's go to the next step. So what we're going to talk about now is putting all this into a package that will give you the center. Here's the end cap where we drilled our hole. Here's the X marks the spot. And of all things, here are two pieces of round toothpick. That's where the number 43 drill size comes in. It just so happens that these round toothpicks that I use are big at just the right size for a number 43 drill. Of course, if you use different ones, that's fine. You just change the drill size to accommodate that. The reason I use a round toothpick instead of like a dowel rod is simply for the size. I just didn't want that large of a size, but what I want this toothpick to do is to carry the center from here, and you see if I spin that, what I did with drilling that hole. I'm holding it by that toothpick, and you can see now this hole stays pretty much dead on center. That means you're ready to transfer this to the blank. The way you do that to make sure your drill doesn't wander is you build a fixture like this. This has 4 holes to help you eyeball those crosshairs. And of all importance is this hole here. Again, the number 43 drill, which I will put directly at that intersection. And what that will do for me is it will hold that drill exactly square and true. So when I drill that little hole, it will be dead on center, it won't wander, and I'll be ready to make the next step. Now the way I do this is I line it up, and I'll look straight down into the center, and I don't think we can pick that up in the camera, but you'll know how to do that. These larger holes help you get close, so that then you can start putting that crosshairs right in the center. The only way to really do that is to put your eye directly over the center and find it. When you do that, the next step is, of course, to clamp this, and I have a table built so that I can clamp right to the table, and it'll hold everything in position while I drill it. So let me get that ready and then I'll show you. Okay, here you can see the whole assembly ready for the drilling. I've got the fixture clamped in place directly over the crosshairs, and it's clamped to my bench. So now I happen to use an air drill, it doesn't matter. When you're using a small drill like this, since it is so small, you can see how small it is, put your drill to highest speed. The faster, the better for these, because as your drill size gets smaller, your drill has to go faster to give you a good clean cut. So let me drill this hole. That's all you need, probably about a 1/4 inch in or so. We'll take the clamp off and see how the result looks. You see that hole is right on center now. And what that does for you is with this, we know that whatever's lined up, there's that little thing is messing with me, so I'll use the other one. Now if you want to make things easy for yourself, you might want to pre-glue this in so it's sticking out about a 1/4 inch or so. Okay, so now I'm going to take this little toothpick, which you could glue into place here first, and that makes it easier. If you do that, make sure that you don't have any glue sticking out here, because that will create a shoulder. But if you have that lightly glued in place, or in this case I'll just start it in this hole first. There it is. Now I can engage this with that toothpick, push it in, and when you glue that, you'll know that the center of your blank will be lined up directly with that hole, which will engage on your lathe and make sure that the entire blank is rotating on center on the lathe. Once you do that, all your turning will be balanced and true to the geometry that you've built with your lamination. That's it for this technique. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, now that we've got another example here where I've got the hole drilled, ready to accept this prepared end cap, and I've got the toothpick already secured in there, glued in, so it's ready to engage in here into that hole, which is fine, but I like to put a piece of veneer in between so that I have a nice clear distinct line when I do the turning. So here's a hunk of veneer that I can use for that. It's big enough to go around. I'm not going to try and cut this round, but if you want to cut veneer, it's good to just use a pair of kitchen shears and cut it basically a square. So I'm going to cut 2 of these. That part is simple enough. But since I want to put this between my handle blank and this end cap, obviously I got a problem with the toothpick. To punch a hole into this is very difficult to use a drill. It's way too thin, it'll catch and probably crack this because it's kind of brittle. You could use a high-speed die grinder to wear a hole in there, but what I like to use is to borrow a tool from our friends in the sheet metal business, and that's this right here. This is called a Whitney punch. It's a punch and die set, and here's an example of how it comes with different sizes punches and dies. So I got a small set in here that will punch a hole for this toothpick. A good way to use it is to put it into a vise, simply because it's kind of hard to hold it and do the work at the same time. So that's good enough to hold it. You can see I can move this here. You can eyeball it towards the center. Again, accuracy is not really important, just close. Punch it in. I've got a hole. Now I'm ready to put that over here. You can see I've got clearance so that I can cover the diameter. And now when I go to glue that in here, oops, it falls out, of course. But now I can put that toothpick in the hole in the handle and through that hole that I punched in my veneer. Now when I turn that, and it'll all be made round when I turn it, it'll be a nice distinct line separating the end cap from the rest of the body.